Hello, and welcome to Whatever Happened to the Gentleman podcast. I am Sam Morris, your host. I am an empowered dating coach, and I've been doing this for 10 years. And it's truly wonderful getting people to realize how to love themselves, how to move on from the past, and how to be in a healthy relationship. So, today's episode, if you are watching on YouTube, you will see that I have clearly recorded this at a different time to when I recorded the actual episode. If you are listening on the podcast, then you can't see anything, but yeah, now you know. Today's episode, I had a wonderful chat with Dr. Lilli Hartwell. The episode originally was supposed to be all about how your physical health affects your mental health. And the episode is still all about that, but we go so much deeper about how every single thing is connected. Everything you put into your body is connected to everything else that is going on in your life. So we talk about how vitamins you think that are going to help you aren't, and we go really deep into how your food and how lots of other things are affecting your mental well-being. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Lilli Hartwell. Hi, Dr. Lilli.
Hi, Sam. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
It's morning there, and it is not morning here. We are on completely different time zones. I have the big light on above me. So, do you want to introduce yourself to all of my lovely guests, listeners?
I would love to. I would love to. So, I'm Dr. Lilli Hartwell. I am a naturopathic doctor in the United States. Although I do serve people from all over the world, and I've traveled all over the world, so I can, deeply connect with. Although it's been a while since I've been to Europe and England in particular, but I have spent a lot of time more in developing nations more recently, just as a part of my medical mission and providing healthcare to all. But as a naturopathic doctor, I went to an accredited school by the U.S. Department of Education. There are 7 in North America. There are including a few in Canada as well. But the one I went to is now rebranded, so it's called Sonoran University of Health Sciences, and I'm also a professor there, as well as a professor
Oh,
at a community college. And I have a private practice in the sunny state of Arizona, which may be, a totally different climate than Liverpool, but I do appreciate the days when it rains. So yesterday it rained. But my formal education is that doctorate of naturopathic medicine, but I'm also an herbalist as well. So botanical medicine is a huge crux of what I do. And I have a bachelor's of science from the University of Arizona in plant sciences, where my emphasis was medicinal ethnobotany. And then beyond that, I've just been training in apprenticeships in herbal medicine. And then my growing up, my grandmother and great grandmother worked with herbs from the Mexican traditional cultural standpoint. So that kind of bridged my interest. And then over time, I've started recognizing the limitations I might have as just an herbalist. So I went and got my full doctorate and can now prescribe medication if I need to, and have a bunch of different modalities at my disposal, including compounded IV nutrients, which is really popular right now, and has a lot of benefit, clinical nutrition, botanical medicine. And then this mental health aspect that I hope to speak to today is a huge component of what I do. I am general primary care, but I do find that motivating people to change, if they're unhappy or, there'll a bunch of different aspects of mental health, but I do find those pieces, if we haven't worked on them, become huge limitations to what I can the the health and healing journey that we can embark on together and that we can facilitate together in my with my patients, but also with people who encounter me on social. They identify a lot of root cause issues, and if they're not mentally well, it's almost a moot point what we can do together. So that becomes a huge aspect, which I started recognizing the second 2 years of our program is largely clinical in addition to didactic. And I started realizing we can't motivational interview someone to change if the foundation of their well-being isn't established. So I ended up really diving deep into all of that as well.
So is that to do with your nature versus nurture? Because I read your article and I don't know if you know much about like what I did before, but I used to work with people that were in prison. And your whole nature versus nurture thing is pretty much what I have seen from experience of if I'd have known these people from kind of age 5, 6, I could have pretty much predicted what was going to happen to them and where they were going to be at the end of that kind of journey. And so when I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is actual science. And I was geeking out on it because I've lived this and I've seen it. And yeah, so tell me a bit about how, you know, nature versus nurture, it can affect who we become.
Oh, okay. Sam, are you talking about the self-care in mothers article?
Yes.
Okay. Whew, you're on it. That just got published in February.
Oh,
Okay, let
you
me
sent it to me.
Oh, I forgot. So
If
okay,
you
so
want to talk
nature
about something, I can
Oh
edit.
no, I'd love to talk about this. So a huge component of that, which I didn't realize that you worked with people in prison. I actually do have some family members who have cycled through the system or who now are going to spend some of their life in the system. And it is interesting to see the difference between, other family members that weren't impacted. But the huge component of that article in particular is the crux of you can put two twins in one environment and if you separate them, maybe they grow up in different environments, even though their genetics fundamentally, they have this genetic imprint. We see the social impact, the behavior impact who they are, what mental health issues they might grow to have. I think primarily in that article, I was alluding to a lot of schizophrenics and a component of who manifests schizophrenia and who doesn't. We also see nutritional deficiencies as a huge component of that. And one can argue that that's a nurture component too, because it's what the 3 meals that you're eating a day decide what your body constitutionally has with it. If it's got the biochemistry that it needs, if it's been given the nutrients that it needs. Um, but also your nervous system, what have you been fostering? Are you growing up in a loving, validating, empowering place, or are your parents overworked and not able to show up for you and you're in survival mode? Then what is your nervous system like? How do you react to what might be considered natural triggers like change? I have a number of students who have told me they don't respond to change well. And it's like, well, it might be kind of difficult for you to practice in medicine because I think someone's coming in for a CC of, a urinary tract infection and they're coming in for a CC of depressive episode. So you prepped for everything and then you get to pivot and change in the moment. And so I find people who are resistant to change, maybe it's a lifestyle issue, maybe it's how they were raised, maybe they grew up in a very tumultuous environment and they weren't validated and empowered in the way that they were growing up, or maybe there was trauma or punishment associated with change. So interesting to see how all of that plays out, and it might predispose you to a mental health concern. Some of these are more rare, like or more unusual, like schizophrenia. But from a mental health standpoint, what I see when someone hasn't been maybe well loved or nurtured or had to parent themselves, that's a huge thing in the U.S. And probably in other developed areas like Europe. When someone has had to parent themselves, they become hyper independent and then have a harder time, particularly in relationship standpoint, of then being able to show up for their partner in a way, or it can manifest a few different ways. They try to parent their partner, and then they're wondering, why they don't love their partner, why there's resentment, and things of that nature. And then other times they have a harder time letting people in, trusting, having faith. There's a certain level of vigilance in the relationship, and that doesn't establish great foundation or roots for a relationship to grow and proliferate, and trust being the backbone of that. Um, but there are a lot of different situations like nature versus nurture where we see, genetically someone should be predisposed to this condition, or they have 3 generations of this mental health issue, and you can empower the patient to overcome it. Sometimes it is a nutritional deficiency, like the MTHFR deficiency, where they're not methylating their B vitamins appropriately, and it might be a genetic single nucleotide polymorphism, like an SNP or a SNAP, or a SNP that we might call it colloquially.
What is that?
That would be like, for example, I think a COMT gene mutation is a really common one,
Okay.
where they unfortunately, because of their handed down genes, that are in their DNA, they are not able to process B vitamins properly. And then certain B vitamins, like the methylation process, is really important because when you're consuming like an animal-based product or you're taking an oral B vitamin supplement, you're not able then to properly methylate and then convert it to what it needs to be. And B vitamins are a huge component of how our biochemistry runs. So, if, like from a physiological standpoint, and not necessarily that it has to come from animal protein. I have a fair number of vegan, vegetarian patients as well. So then we need to get them from other sources. But if you can't properly methylate, we see you're predisposed for things like schizophrenia, depression. Maybe you don't have enough vitamin D in your diet, or where in the area that you're living. Like, very common in England to have major depressive episodes associated with vitamin D deficiency.
Oh,
And so
really?
then, because it is so dark and rainy, and then it's difficult for you to then, it's not as
Mm.
bioavailable to you to convert from the sun. So then you get it from your food. Are we getting it from our food? Usually not. And so then we might take an oral supplement, but then how is the oral supplement? It's a vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin, so how is that becoming bioavailable in your body? If you're taking it away from fat, usually you're not going to extract as much as you think you are. So I'll have patients take these, what they think are super high doses, and it's maybe the form isn't bioavailable, like it's vitamin D1 rather than vitamin D3. So it's not even the right form for your body to convert appropriately through the biochemical processes. And then they're taking it
I'll take
away
some
from fat.
notes.
Oh, sorry, Sam. I'm going,
No,
I'm on a
no,
tangent.
it's because I vitamins are kind of a great thing for us, but also they're quite difficult to get. So my son has ADHD,
Mm,
and so we have kind of not mastered, but we've got certain vitamins down that really like help him,
mhm.
but actually finding vitamins that are not full of all other things that he should not be putting into his body is extremely difficult. And they're really expensive, and you go to the store and you can buy the children's vitamins that are like in the bottles for £2, but the ones that he can have that don't have stuff that are just full of just absolute rubbish that I don't want him to have in his body, is like £14
Yep.
for a smaller bottle. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting because I didn't know there was different types of vitamin D.
Yeah, there's different types of vitamin D, and then how is it being absorbed? You've got to take it with fat, and so that can be very troublesome for some people, right? Because we don't always have a fatty component with all of our meals. So then you want to time it. Are you consuming it near? Like, I will recommend avocado is a
I
really
was just gonna
easy.
say avocado.
I'm like, are you consuming avocado? Let's have a little avocado toast.
Yeah.
Consume your vitamin D around that time. But so these are components. It's like someone thinks, they've identified the issue. They're vitamin D deficient on their lab work. Okay, well, what are we going to do about it? Let's take some vitamin D. Oh, we've not taken the right form. We're not dosing it appropriately with our food. Or a lot of people, unfortunately, will dose their vitamins with coffee. And coffee is very tannin rich, or I guess I should say tea. Maybe we've got some Earl Grey
Yeah,
tea going on.
we
I remember
we
drinking a
drink
lot
coffee
of
as well. So
I remember drinking a lot of tea when I was over there, which I love tea.
Yeah.
But they're very tannin rich. Often what we're consuming in the morning, to kind of wake us up and integrate into our rhythm, and wake up routine. Often they're very tannin rich, which is astringing, and so your body's not absorbing. It creates a film. The tannins create a film of tannins within the mucosa in the stomach, so you're actually not absorbing a lot of what you think you are when you dose. And the same thing goes with medicine, like polypharmacy, pharmaceuticals. If you're consuming, like the classic thing is if you're hypothyroid and you're consuming a levothyroxine medication with your coffee or with food, you're often not absorbing it. And it's actually in the pamphlet, the farm pamphlet that comes with the medication. But I mean, how often are we sitting there opening these like 10-page pamphlets of fine print, especially if you are hypothyroid, you don't have energy and you're totally overwhelmed, or maybe you're also ADHD and you're like totally overwhelmed by sitting down reading this fine print thing that maybe your pharmacist should have gone over with you. So there are a lot of those, simple limitations, which ends up being what I do a lot in my practice is like, all right, so you're taking this, but you're not reacting to this dose. Before we raise the dose, let's see, are you taking it appropriately? Are you taking the right form? Is this form something you've reacted to in the past, that we know might benefit you? Maybe we need to redraw labs. Um,
So
anyway.
if so all of this stuff is connected, and if you're not taking care of your body, then it is likely to affect you somewhere else. Not just the way that you look. People always focus on, I look great, I go to the gym and I've got some nice abs, or I got a flat stomach, or whatever. But in the head, they are kind of doubting themselves, or they're depressed, they're not kind of feeling great about themselves. How would you say, or what would you recommend that people, like the first steps for them to start looking at actually what is going wrong here in what I'm eating and what I'm putting into my body? Because I know obviously in America you have lots of different types of doctors. In the UK, we just have a general practitioner that you go to, who will normally you go and you say, I feel a bit sad, and they'll say, here's some antidepressants. Or you go and you say, I'm addicted to gambling, and they'll say, here's some antidepressants. And that is pretty much just the kind of the answer, unless it's a serious medical issue, and then they would be referred. So
Oh,
how would
okay.
you, like, where would you start?
Okay, so first things first is I work integratively with, because we have got an insurance model, I try to get as much covered through insurance as I can with my patients. And that often is like if I can, if we can get lab work through them, I will. So first things first is like, okay, what's the key component that you're identifying for yourself? Like, for some people, they might not even know they're sad. I just ask them, when is the last time that you felt joy? Like, when is the last time that you smiled, right? Because just like you just said, Sam, so many people are so focused on the external, how does it look? And I went through this whole process myself of like, okay, I dread doing my makeup. I very rarely will do my makeup nowadays. And for me, and I dread doing something with my hair. So I'll just do like I have my mainstays, my go-tos. And by editing out some of my schedule, I started to feel like, oh my gosh, I have time to meditate and journal and feel joy. So something I ask new patients, when they establish care is, what's going on with you? So you want to be healthy. Why have we not been healthy? Do you have sad days? Do you have anxious days? Do you have days where you're ruminating on something that happened 10 years ago? How long have you been going through this? So the top mental health things that I often see in my practice, I think it's probably like four things that mitigate the ability for someone to then start making even steps and considering looking at their diet because that can be overwhelming. Oftentimes it's like they haven't felt joy. Okay, so they're sad. So maybe they are depressed. So then the healthcare provider, they get to go see a healthcare provider and tell them, I'm feeling kind of low, and oftentimes they'll follow up with a DSM-5 criteria of like, okay, do they qualify to be, and I don't know if it's DSM-5 in the US, but it's like a little questionnaire of
Okay.
um, do they have the symptoms for major depressive disorder? Diagnostically, can we diagnose them with major depressive disorder? Sometimes we'll also offer, like in my office, I'll offer something called the PCLC score, which is a PTSD scoring. And it's
Okay.
also the DSM-5 criteria for PTSD. Trauma is a huge reason, why people can't progress forward. Sometimes it's CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, like something that they've been going on for 20 years. Maybe they served in the armed forces, is very common in my office, and they've been cycling through something they can't heal over, or something happened in childhood, a component of that nature versus nurture, and they can't seem to move forward, or they can't have healthy relationships because they felt like they didn't have a healthy father relationship or a healthy mother relationship. So then we start to discuss, is your nervous system dysregulated? Do you have episodes of anxiety in addition to PTSD? Sometimes they're very anxious. There's PHQ-9. There's the GAD-7 and the PHQ-9. These are like little questionnaires that your healthcare provider should fill out with you. You can also find them really easily online. Sometimes patients will just take a look and see, like, is there something that's going on for me? I don't even know. Am I anxious? But maybe, we're very reactive. Sometimes someone will say they're impatient or they're reactive, and I realize anxiety is the underlying reason why. So we might work up in office an anxiety workup or a panic disorder of some kind. And these are all mental health disorders. Sometimes it's ADD or ADHD, like you said, Sam, that your son goes through. I see that as a huge piece. People have been misdiagnosed as anxious, but they're actually ADHD, and
Yeah.
their nervous system isn't responding appropriately to stimuli. So they have a hard time. This was like my dad's picture when he was a little boy. His teachers would tell him to stand next to his chair because he was so fidgety. But he had ADD. He had undiagnosed ADD, and so everyone would just say, why can't you just calm down? And it's like the body physiologically cannot. It
Yeah.
needs support. It's often genetic. Sometimes it's a vitamin, nutritional deficiency. So we see these as components. So first things first is identify which of those might serve you, and there are a lot of others, right? There's that diagnostic module for mental health. It's vast. So, but those are the most common things I see in my office. And so if that is something that you or one of your clients is experiencing, we first want to identify what might be going on. Then we can take a look at, okay, so are you feeling anxious after you eat this food? Like I might do a diet diary with my patient. Are you feeling anxious with this food, or how long have you been consuming this food? Like I have a few patients who are very they follow a ketogenic diet or more a
Yeah.
paleo diet. They're more that is, for your listeners, more carnivorous, and maybe more maybe plant-based isn't a huge component of what they're doing, so they're getting a lot more fats and protein, but lesser so plants. But we need a varied diet to
Of
make sure
all
that they're
the
getting their
foods.
nutrition. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So sometimes I like to take a look at that too. But sometimes it can be totally overwhelming. Like imagine you're depressed or you're sad. You don't know you're depressed yet. You're sad. Sometimes the reason why someone has sadness is they don't have any energy. They don't have any motivation. Sometimes it's a thyroid issue. Sometimes it's a vitamin D issue. Sometimes their cortisol is dysregulated. So that's our stress response hormone. So we're not being conscientious. We don't have a normal sleep wake cycle. We don't know that sometimes we're anxious or we're unmotivated, or at night you're motivated all of a sudden, but all day you weren't motivated. Sometimes that's the cortisol is dysregulated. It's not following the appropriate sleep wake pattern, and your circadian rhythm is impacted. So then we might involve other things. Burnout or adrenal fatigue, or needing adrenal support is a huge component of that as well. So those are probably the most common things, and I always recommend, if they can, do either a self-questionnaire before they go see a provider. I think we all operate a little differently. Like I, as a provider, I listen to my patient. I'm like, all right, so what's been going on with you? And then we co-facilitate care, because I want them to be able to I'm trying to foster them to be able to nurture themselves outside of an appointment, because patients and your clients, they live their life outside of their appointments with
Yeah.
us, right? So how can I empower them to go do that? Sometimes it's identifying, all right, they they can't clean their room. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Why can't you clean your room? Oh, it's overwhelming. Okay, can we start with a single component? Can we start with a single picking up a single plate and bringing it out down to the kitchen? Maybe we can start there. So those will be the pieces that I start with. Then I'll start taking a look at some of the nutrition, see what all they're eating. Sometimes I might head toward a supplement, a nutraceutical, rather than trying to change their diet because they might not have the motivation to start changing diet. That can be overwhelming. Um, so those are like the key components I start with, starting places.
I love that because so I used to be really overweight and I have lost 6 stone. So in pounds, what's that? Uh, I can't even work that out because my brain is really bad. Maybe about 80 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, like a lot of weight.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, it's been a long time. It's just like 10 years ago. But I remember that when I was overweight and I was really, I was miserable and I was in a bad relationship and pretty much every kind of relationship with any male up until that point had been a negative one, including like my biological father. And I used to live in this constant state of feeling like I had pressure on my chest and I couldn't breathe. And then I obviously started losing weight and I became single and all these things happened to me all at the same time. I stopped smoking as well. I used to smoke, and this kind of weight, this tightening of my chest, it went away. And I was like, oh yeah, it was just the weight, or it was all of that. It was just stress. And then I remember, maybe about 5 years later, and I was presenting for the first time. Like I'd never presented to a group of people before, and I had a presentation, and all of a sudden I had this same feeling in my chest, like I couldn't breathe, and I had to sit on the floor and breathe it out for
Mhm.
like 2 minutes and just keep breathing in and out. And then I was fine. I went on and I presented. But afterwards, I thought to myself, all that time, I just thought it was because I was overweight. And actually, it was anxiety. And
Yeah.
I was just living in a constant state of anxiety. And then
Hmm.
obviously, when I had an anxious moment, it still came out, but I had the skills to be able to deal with it, luckily, at that point in my life. But years and years ago, I just lived in this constant state. And I think that was like kind of the whole point of getting you on here, was to talk about how there are, physical health signs if your
Hmm.
mental health like isn't right, and it's all connected with each other.
Exactly. They are literally holding hands with each other. And I think sometimes, and this, you bring up a good point. It's like I always talk about new year, new you. Everyone's really excited about the beginning of change in January. And what I always caution people to think about is I want you to think about how you are feeling, less or so how the end result is, right? Like, oh, I want to lose this amount of weight, or whatever that might look like. It looks different for different people, especially if we're focusing on the image and the presentation. Obviously, we want you to be healthy, um, but that health, sometimes people forget the mental health piece. You can look a certain way and be the most miserable that you ever have in the past. But just like you just described, Sam, so many people come to my office and they're like, I can't quite place it, but I just don't feel like myself. And I haven't felt like myself in such and such time. What was going on around that time? Like, it's all about, like, naturopathic medicine is all about root cause medicine. And sometimes my patients cycle through the conventional medical system and they come to find tools and techniques that work for them. Like maybe it's breath work, like in an anxious moment like that, breathing that is a huge thing to reset your nervous system
Yeah.
because your nervous system can easily be dysregulated. But when you've been living in survival mode for so long, you've been living in sympathetic overdrive, which is very common in developed nations. It is very common to be living in sympathetic overdrive. We're constantly consuming stimulants. Like I also used to smoke cigarettes and sometimes, fall off the wagon and have my own little progression with that. But that's very common. And that used to be the common choice of stimulants, especially in the United States, up until 20 years ago. So I come from
It's
like
TikTok now.
it's TikTok now, but also also flavored sugar coffee.
Yeah.
Like there's a cafe on every corner. There, it's very reliant where it's less or so about how well did I sleep the night before, and it's more so about how I can offset the fact that I didn't sleep well, or I was stressed and anxious, or I had nightmares about giving a presentation at work tomorrow. And then I'm overriding my nervous system and thrusting my nervous system into sympathetic. Well, then how can you show up safely in a relationship, whether it be an intimate relationship or relationship at work, like working with your coworkers, working on a team project, your relationship with yourself? How can you give yourself love if you're constantly criticizing yourself and you feel like you've never done anything right? Or maybe you hear someone in the back of your head, like a parent, constantly critiquing you, especially if you didn't have a quote unquote healthy relationship with your parent. But also, something, especially that nature versus nurture article that we were alluding to at the beginning, also something to recognize is like the parent was going through their own development at that time. And, I'm pretty sure my parents would parent me differently now that they've had 30 something years to think about it and to
Yeah.
process it because they were just trying to pay their bills. And I spent a heck of a lot of time with my grandparents who then imparted such knowledge and wisdom on me. And I'm so grateful for that. But I don't think that that's exactly the painted picture that my family wanted for their child when they were just trying to pay their bills too.
Yeah.
So we end up imparting things by not taking care of ourselves and not knowing, which is the crux of that article, is like when the caregiver doesn't provide care for themselves, how do they then impact those around them and also their themselves? We see people who say they're completely burned out, nothing brings them joy, and they've completely exacerbated all of their nutrients. They can't I can't tell them to go sit in a park and feel joy, right? I will encourage that. Sometimes I prescribe that as like, I think you need to go hiking more, especially in the urban environments that we're in where we feel so separate from
Yeah.
nature. But sometimes you can't motivate someone to feel something if they're going to sit there anxiously worried about and checking their phone every 5 minutes about their meeting that they have at 4 o'clock later that day. So the reset, the nervous system dysregulation is extremely common and goes often unheard until someone says that they're not sleeping well, they're dealing with chronic insomnia, they never feel fully rested, there might be very anxious, or they might they might oscillate between feeling exhausted and depressed and unmotivated. And I'm like, well, what's the root cause of that lack of motivation? But identifying what you're feeling is actually key, right? Just like you identified, Sam, that you were like, something's sitting on my chest. That can describe, in medical terms, that symptom can describe like, I can think of like 10 differentials off the top of my head. And anxiety is one of them. But also angina and
Yeah.
impending heart attack, right?
Yeah.
Which then, if you're anxious, you're like, oh my God, is this it? Am I having this reaction? And then you spiral down something else. Um, so then identifying that, finding tools then, okay, maybe it's breath work. Like for Sam, it sounds like breath work was the
Yeah.
key. Sometimes it's an aroma, sometimes it's a smell. Like I have a few patients who they'll have little essential oil based sprays that they carry around with them, and they're like, okay, lavender is soothing. Lavender, we know from a botanical medicine aspect, lavender is anxiolytic. It lyses anxiety. It helps to reset the nervous system and allow you to come down in the parasympathetic state. So maybe the smell of a lavender essential oil or a lavender sachet of plant material if they're open to that. Um, so I speak to botanicals because that's so easy, right? Is like, how can I reset my patient with botanicals? It's really easy. There are a lot of nervous system targeted plants and herbs that can be a great component too. But you're right, we have to identify how does the patient feel, or the client, or the individual, how does the listener, listen in, tune in, listener, how do you feel inside? Are you ambivalent? Are you empty? Do you have episodes of joy, or when was the last time that you felt joyful? Do you feel like you're looking to the next worst case scenario, like when the other shoe is going to drop? Or are you living in the moment, um, and noticing your surroundings? Some of my students will say they've been Hartwellized. Like they'll pass through my botanical medicine classes, and I'll be like, look at how beautiful this lilac plant is. And they'll then pass by like a tree, and they're like, wow, that's a beautiful tree. I've never sat and thought about that tree. And they're like, she got to me. She was in my head. But often, we don't we are so forward focused as a society. I'm noticing like my patients, these beautiful, incredible things are happening to them. Like they lost 80 pounds over 10 years, and they're still maybe struggling with weight loss. And they're like, I just feel like it's never getting better. And it's like, well, 10 years ago, you would have loved to be in
Yeah.
this position. But sometimes we're so forward focused, and, the next thing on to the next thing. It's like, what is happening in this moment? Check in with yourself in this moment.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think because I always ask my clients, like, because most of them they want a relationship, and I'm like, okay, but why? Like, what's wrong with what's happening right now? And I'm not saying, having a relationship is great if it's the right one, if it's someone that aligns with who you are, and it makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel loved, and gives you kind of passion as well, and someone that you could literally be like, I'm really having a bad day, and they say, I'm here to support you, then yes, having that in your life is fantastic. But if you are seeking out a relationship for the sake of being in a relationship, something else is going on, because most people, well, I think everyone should be happy in themselves and by themselves first, and then it comes. And the universe, obviously, I believe that the universe sends you what you're supposed to have. So but if you're sending out like the wrong messages, then that's probably not going to happen. And I think, like, with kind of what we were saying about like my anxiety, I always say to people that there are parts in your body that are giving you clues. And I do, well, I do breath work, I do various different things. I'm trauma informed trained, so a lot of the stuff that I do naturally with myself is because I've just been doing it for years with other people, and then I obviously then work on myself. But part of my program, I give a bonus, which is the Healing Haven, which goes through, there is breath work, there's meditations, but then there's other kind of actionable steps around resetting your nervous system and bringing yourself out, and talking about the clues that the body is giving you, and how to kind of reduce arousal and things like that, because it's so important. And if you don't kind of master one thing, you can't master another.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Sam. So some of those symptoms, just for your listeners, it might be like if they're in nervous system dysregulation, there may be sympathetic overdrive. Maybe they constantly have sweaty palms, or they sweat often, and it doesn't seem to be like an external reason why, right? So it's stress related. They can't sleep, they're jittery, they're fidgety, they can't focus. They just feel very anxious. Sometimes they might describe like increased heart rate, um, sweating in abnormal places. Like sometimes, we expect it in the axle or the armpit, but maybe their feet are extra sweaty and they can't figure out why that is. So some of those components, then we can re-regulate in the moment, right? Like you alluded to things in the haven. Maybe I recommend often to my patients something very easy in an anxious moment, where I didn't coin this. I found it somewhere, probably online, probably TikTok at some point. But it was been really helpful and restorative in resetting the nervous system. And it's just saying peace begins with me. And every time you say that one of those words, you bring a finger down. So you involve your whole body. So
Yes.
peace begins with me. And just coming back into your body, because oftentimes people have they're like thinking 10 years ahead about this one thing that happened. And so how can we like bring it back in? Or ice to the chest can be really helpful if someone's in a sympathetic overdrive state. Or maybe, for those of your clients who are in maybe an unhealthy relationship and they're working on removing themselves from that cycle, maybe figuring out how then to validate themselves can be very important. And having a healthy relationship, I think I alluded that to you with that is I had an unhealthy relationship and I felt like I was falling into the same pattern over and over again. But I have an excellent relationship with my father. So I was so confused, what I don't have this father wound. So then I got to explore some other types of wounding from a psychological standpoint that I'm like recreating. There wasn't a lot of self-soothing when or there wasn't a lot of external soothing when I was growing up, and then recognizing, oh, so sometimes I'm seeking that out in my relationships without knowing, right? These unconscious patterns that keep playing out. So how can I self-soothe? And then that makes me better able to soothe my patients and offer them tools, garner them tools to regulate their nervous system as well. And for me, sometimes I'm carrying botanicals around. I'm like, okay, I'm going to take this supplement today because I'm feeling a little anxious. Or I'm going to, re-regulate my adrenals and make sure I'm supported. So recognizing those key components can really allow you to grow into a healthy relationship with self so that you're not looking for external validation, motivation. You're not looking for a partner to achieve these aims. So I think absolutely, what are these cycles? Why are we looking for someone externally? But for me, being in medical school and training after training after training, I recognized I was kind of seeking like a lifeboat person, like this other
Mm.
person to be in my lifeboat so we can survive these experiences together. And it doesn't mean that those relationships weren't serving, that I didn't learn. They weren't people they weren't my person. They weren't the person for me, but every relationship got me closer to that person. And then I reached a point after medical school, after I sat for my board exams, we were waiting to hear back from licensure. My partner and I broke up, and I was like, I'm not feeling like I can be in a relationship again. I think I need to rework relationship with self. Took 6 months to do that. And that looked very differently for me than it might look like that for some of your clients. As you take a 6 month break, you're hiking, you're doing the things that you love, those hobbies that have been collecting dust in the closet. Go do those hobbies. Why didn't you do those hobbies? Well, your partner wasn't interested in them and they didn't, you ended up doing their hobbies is what I ended up doing. I'm like, oh, I'm doing their hobbies. Or I love hiking and camping and going outdoors, and maybe we're not doing that as often because it financially cost prohibitive. How can I curate that locally to allow myself to be able to do that? And then over time, I started dating again, and it just wasn't right. And I think that person could recognize it, and I don't think they recognized it initially. I recognized it more than they did, and I had to just let them know, you are a wonderful person. It really wasn't that it's me, it's you thing. It was truly, I don't love myself enough to show up for you the way that you deserve to be shown up for. Rather than us belabor this, I don't want to do this cycle. I want to choose me. I want you to choose you. And then when I can choose someone else in addition to me, I will then open back up. So for me, like I've told you, Sam, that took 5 years. I was on, and not very few people know that. My partner, my now partner, obviously knows that, and he also took a 2 year break before he started dating me. And we recognize in that moment you had to love yourself. You had to learn these systems, for me, I had to develop. I do everything by a standard operating procedure, right? Because I'm in medicine, so I'm like, what's the SOP to make Lily happy? What I'm having a down day, something didn't go the way that I like, or we in the world of teaching, because that's a huge aspect of what I do, there's a lot of evaluations, and sometimes the evaluations are very personal, less professional and more so about you as a person. And it's like, okay, you didn't like me as a person. now I suddenly can't make that mean I don't like me as a person. So developing tools and tactics and an SOP for me, which I often will do with my patients, and you probably do with your clients, how can I find joy for tomorrow if it's not a joyful day? And developing that so that it's such a key component of my patterning rather than, for some people we choose certain, I see my patients sometimes rely on substances, like, they're having a bad day. A colleague of mine we had just had this conversation yesterday. A colleague of mine just broke up with his partner, a long-term partner. They live together. And he mentioned, he's not the kind of person that will drink and try to drown his sorrows in drinking. And I laughed a little bit because I have a fair number of patients that might do that, right? And they've gone on a journey with alcohol as a substance. And that's, just one of many substances. Sometimes the cannabis is recreational in Arizona, so sometimes it's cannabis. Like, we're trying to dull the senses rather than feel and process the emotion. And sometimes processing the emotion is not pleasant, but we get
No.
to do that so we don't store it within the body, right? So we do see like these energetic patterns play out in the physicality, in the physiology of the cell. And sometimes it can be easier to identify, like you're having a sad day, how much water did you drink? Well, if more than 70% of your physiological cells are comprised of water and you didn't hydrate, now tomorrow you're even more unwell, right? That's more of a reality thing. Like internally, your cells are not hydrated the way that they need to be, so your biochemical processes will not progress appropriately. But also, are you living in filth? Is your area clean? Is your pet taken care of? Have you, what kind of things did you do for yourself? Did you take a bath recently? For people who, struggle with a lot of intrusive thoughts and depressive episodes, sometimes just taking a shower can be absolutely overwhelming,
Yeah.
right? And they can't take care of their dishes or make food for themselves. So nutritionally, you become impacted. So I truly believe these components of mental health and physical health are completely married, and we can't even tether them apart. I can't motivate a patient to heal if they simply are unwell
Yeah.
at the offset.
And I think you make a very good point there that, people will use drugs, they'll use alcohol, they'll use whatever it is to kind of dull their, the feelings. They don't want to feel their feelings. And I get that because, it's hard. It's hard to recognize actually this feels bad for me. And it's hard to go through that process and heal yourself. It's not easy. If it was easy, everyone would do it. But, but a lot of people will then like kind of jump straight into another relationship to try and fix that from
Yes.
before. And it's no different to you going and getting wasted.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you're getting that intoxication from a new human. And we all kind of get it is like a dopamine hit when you get into a new relationship. And I've read like the studies that can last up to like 2 years
Yes.
of, you're getting this constant dopamine hit and this constant high from a relationship. And then, if you break up, you miss it and you want it, so you go get another relationship, and you keep finding yourself in the same cycle, just rushing into new relationships to make yourself feel better.
Yes.
But you're never going to find like the right relationship if you haven't made yourself feel better on your own,
Mm-hmm.
on your own terms. That makes
Yes.
sense.
It makes so much sense. Yes, it's the peacefulness and groundfulness that comes from within. It's all internal work. Sometimes the rest is the work, sometimes going within is the work, and I see this happen, and it could be with a relationship, it could be with a substance, it could be for many people, it's food. They
Yeah.
have an addiction. Studies have shown that sugar is in the same path, sugar activates the same neurotransmitter pathway as things like cocaine. So the addiction there, if like going to get a snack, going to get sugar, and then all of a sudden, it's 3 years have gone by. There's weight at the waist that we we weren't looking to have, and it's just storing there. And your hemoglobin A1C, the measurement for your blood glucose, it's higher than it should. Maybe we're on track for prediabetes, and it's because the mechanism of coping isn't a healthy mechanism of coping.
Yeah.
And the reality is daily stress is daily. Change is constant. We are dynamic human beings living in a dynamic environment. If it was static, it would be boring. But also, I can't imagine us living in a static environment. I don't know how, this dystopia is a part of what we belong to, and we're animals, we're a natural part of nature existing in these different environments. So coping strategies in general become a huge component of it. But also, to your point, Sam, something that I see some of my patients do and we have to work through is where are they trying to meet someone new, right? If we know that they don't have a healthy relationship with alcohol and they're going to a bar and meeting someone who is present at a bar after work late at night and then expecting that the rest of your relationship won't look like that, that's that's not very logical,
No.
right? And I just have to be like the logical little Spock person. I don't know if you watch Star Trek, but sometimes I have to be the logical little Spock of like, this is action A and this is action B. So you met someone on a bar and you're tired of all of your social events being at a bar. Okay, that's what this person's lifestyle is. So maybe you can't expect this person to change their entire lifestyle, and you met on terms at this. So they thought that was your lifestyle too. So sometimes what I'll have my patients do is join a single hiking club, a single person's hiking club, or join a sport that they like. Like I love soccer, and I have a few patients who are like, we're pro soccer players, and I'm like, okay, or I guess it's still called soccer, or no, it's football.
Football.
It's football. Sorry, folks. All right, my US is showing. So maybe I'll say join a football club, and they'll meet someone through that, or they'll meet someone through that. They'll form friendships, which healthy friendships can allow you to, show up better in an intimate relationship. So I'll have people start meeting people and friends of friends in yoga classes. It starts with a self-care action that they would like. They used to go watch concerts regularly and they haven't been to a concert in a while. Well, who is your buddy that you went to concerts with? What are they up to? Can you go to that concert with another upcoming concert with them and maybe you'll meet someone there? So I think from a fundamental standpoint, once you've done and as you're doing the work on yourself, also attracting the right person is meeting them in a place that's suitable to your lifestyle rather than some of these classical places, that people go to meet. And it's like, well, this is going to be dysfunctional from the offset.
Yeah.
You're just born to repeat the cycle here because you made the choice of where you met them at an inappropriate place. Or then you start to only be able to interact with them under the influence or under duress of some kind of substance or some kind of situational duress.
I find it so interesting that I have lots of different guests on, and we've all got different experience, different expertise, but we are all pretty much not that I'm religious, but the saying is singing from the same hymn sheet in the because I always say to people, if you want to meet new people, what are you interested in? Go find a club for it.
Oh, wow.
And because it is, you will naturally, if you're interested in something, the people that are at that club will also be interested in it, and you will naturally become friends. And if you've got decent people around you that are interested in the things that you want to be interested in, you start to interact with other people, and your communication skills will naturally get better because you obviously, if you're sitting in your house not talking to anyone, your communication skills are going to get worse. And
Absolutely.
you may find the love of your life who is interested in the same thing as you, or you may find that you met this friend at a club who then introduces you to someone who is in alignment, because this friend knows, oh, I know you're great, and I know this person and they're great, and you'd be great together.
Exactly, Sam. Maybe a friend of a friend is going to connect you.
Yeah.
I think key components too, just that I want to make sure that I can comment to you and to your listeners is how you're starting the day, how you start the day in the morning. There's an interesting book by Mel Robbins, and she speaks to like high-fiving yourself. How often do we, and I think it's just a key component of self-validation. How often, and I never thought about it until I read this component in her book. It was how often do we high-five everyone else? We congratulate everyone. Oh, that was a great presentation. You did a great job. Or to our loved ones, that was excellent. When was the last time that you self-validated and you high-fived yourself? So there was a period of time during my 5 years where I just high-five myself in the mirror every morning. I'm like, looking great. You're doing great. And you woke up and this is amazing because there were some, you process grief differently. And I had during that time, a few people very close to me pass away. And that was like very isolating. So self-validation in the morning. So whatever that might look like to you, whatever process it's, but anchor it with something that you're going to do every day in the morning for you. And if you don't feel better in 45 days, I'll be shocked just from anchoring yourself in one little meditative component, whatever that may look like for you.
Yeah, because I've got I don't know if you can actually see it behind me. So I don't know why my husband's put it up like that, but The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. And this book changed my life in so many ways, but it is all about your morning routine and how much it can just change everything for you. And I have a morning routine, I have to do breath work and I have to read. So every single day I have to read. And if I don't, you can tell there's signs because I'm not in a good mood. And I'm like, I've not read today. And I do the same where, when I'm doing my breath work, I tell myself how amazing I am and what I'm bringing to the world today. And you're right. You do that even after 7 days. If you tell yourself you're amazing for 7 days, something starts to click and you're like, oh, actually, I am quite good at that. Even if I'm quite good at talking to myself.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually this story that you just shared, Sam, just actually reminded me of an exercise I sometimes do with my patients is like if they're having issues with self-love, sometimes I'll just tell them, all right, by the next appointment, I want you to have written down, sat down in, quiet or with music that you resonate to and write down, I love myself 100 times. And I've had a few patients say, well, that seems very self-interested. And it's like, yeah, maybe you're too focused on everyone else that you need to remind yourself of the importance that you have for yourself. So I had a patient where she came back and she was like, I cried so much after I just released so much because she did not realize, how harsh her words were to herself. And that came back a little bit to, for her, how her mom communicated with her. And so she was very hard on herself and she heard her in the back of her mind. So that was, someone I thought of when I was writing that self-care article for mothers is, all right, let's see what we're doing to our kiddos and how we can, be the
Yeah.
change that we want to be. So I think the morning routine's pivotal. I also think you can set yourself up. My partner is not really a morning person, so he sets himself up in the nighttime. So sometimes for people,
Okay.
it's a nighttime routine of like, what do you want to eat in the morning? What are you going to take for lunch at work? What are you going to wear that day? Can you put it out the night before? So those are strategies that I implement too, is like to better implement myself and have a little better awareness of where I'm headed so that I can feel comfortable as an anxious person taking that time in the morning for myself and knowing it won't negatively impact what I have else to do that day because I already set myself up really well the night before.
I love that. And I think just 'cause we do need to wrap up. I told you it'd be half an hour and we talked a lot longer than that. So I apologize. But a lot of the things that you are saying are things that we do in our house that we've learnt a lot of the stuff because of my son's ADHD, because the way that his brain works, tasks need to be simplified and it needs to be very kind of straightforward. And I actually had a conversation. I was delivering a workshop earlier this week, and one of the ladies in the workshop has ADHD and she's an adult. And she just said, you made it so simple. And I was like, maybe we should all just live our lives like we all have ADHD and just make things super simple. Set yourselves up, like you said, get your clothes out the day before so that you haven't got to spend 10 minutes of your energy to be like, what do I wear today? Your brain wants it to be easy. It needs everything to, be easy. And then when it's not easy, that's when you become stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the whole dysregulation just starts all over again. So make everything simple. Back to your my room's not tidy. One item at a time. Like my son, we get him to put away his clothes and we say, it's just one top that you're hanging up right now. And he does one top. And then we say, and it's just another one top.
Exactly.
And it's just breaking these things down so they're not overwhelming because, looking at a pile, even as an adult, looking at a pile of loads of clothes is like, I don't want to deal with it. I would rather hide that in a cupboard than deal with that. So,
Right,
yeah,
because you have like 40 other tasks running in your mind that you've got
yeah,
to work on too. So it's like how high priority is that, right?
yeah.
So that reminds me of this ancient proverb, and I'm happy to close on that too. This ancient Chinese proverb that I actually found a lot of solace with when I was going through my 5 years of taking a break from dating and working on my own self-love journey and my work and what it is that brings me joy outside of all the other things. And that proverb was, the journey of 1,000 steps begins with a single one. And that has been so transformative for me, because the reality is when we're in these I mean, our world has more stimuli than 100 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we are inundated. So arguably, we all are running a little bit on a hamster wheel of an ADD brain, at least from a small, minute standpoint. So how easy is it if we just start with one thing at a time and honor that and congratulate ourselves for that one thing at a time, so that each time it gets easier and easier and easier. And then the routine pattern is all of a sudden in 10 minutes, you're done with all the loads. You know, we can really make these things a lot simpler. And I think by overcomplicating them, it becomes overwhelming and unactionable and inaccessible as well. You can't imagine doing these things because it's just overwhelming. That
Too much.
exactly.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Lily, for joining me.
Thank you, Sam. I'm so sorry to have kept you up so late, but
No,
yeah,
it's only
we
like
got going.
it's 8:30. So
For mom life, might as well be 11 o'clock.
no, my kids are big, well, bigger. They're like 11 and 15. So yeah, I get up before them. They're just in bed. So, right, let me. Oh, sorry. Where can people find you? I was just about to cut the recording off.
Oh,
If they
if
want to
people are
find you,
interested, yeah, if people want to find me, everything I think is Dr. So Dr. Lilly, but it's spelled a little odd. So Lillea, and then Hartwell, my last name of Hartwell, Hartwell, at all the places. We're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we've got a website. Our podcast is not well loved lately, because I'm more excited to be on other people's podcasts, but we do have one as well, Health from the
oh,
Heart.
cool.
So you can find us at any of those places. But also,
I'll put it in the show notes as well, just so people can click and make their life easier because we're talking about making life easier.
exactly, explore away, Sam. And then also, if we cross post, where can people find you?
Oh, well, I am obviously the host of this podcast, but I am at thesammorris.com, and then everything like you, everything is from there. So
Make it
cool.
easy, make it
Yeah.
simple.
How amazing was that? So if you want to know any more about Lily, Dr. Lily, I will put it down below. And as ever, thank you for listening to the podcast. Thank you for liking and sharing. I would really love for you to tell me what your main takeaways from this episode was. So please contact me at the on Instagram. Send me a DM. I read them all, and you might just get a little voice note back from me. I will see you next time.